What you are about to see is a video that has been stripped from the internet across virtually all sources because the media company CTV that originally aired this video has been sending threatening letters from the legal department telling organizations to pull this video due to copyright concerns. So the video has disappeared off of YouTube and other video sources. Naturalnews.tv has also received a request from Bell Media, the owner of CTV, requesting that this video be removed. However, we have decided that the use of this video falls squarely under fair use for the following reasons, and thus we are not removing this video. We are going to continue to keep it up publicly for purposes of public education, criticism, and comment. And here's why this is important. In this video, you're going to see a journalist named Bridget Brown who works for CTV, and she is reporting that there's a big gold sell-off happening. This is in early October of 2011. It may have been recorded actually September 29th is probably the live air date on this, September 29, 2011. She's reporting that gold is being sold off, and then she explains that a trader told her that the gold sell-off is due to concerns that gold is backed by nothing, but the dollar is a lot safer because the U.S. dollar is backed by what she calls the, quote, American government. Now, this is a very important bit of information to understand because it shows a very disturbing dumbing down of understanding the basics of economics within the mainstream media. So if a journalist can get on television and repeat a quote like that and say, well, gold is backed by nothing, but dollars are backed by a government, it means that the mainstream media is becoming so dumbed down on issues of fiat currency, real money, the economy, and so on, that we're in real trouble in terms of the information the public is receiving, information upon which the public makes decisions about voting, decisions about saving money or spending money, decisions about how to protect their assets or their savings through diversification strategies and so on. Now, the reason this quote is so nonsensical is because gold itself has inherent or intrinsic value. Gold is valuable for many reasons. For example, because it's very rare, it is very difficult and costly to mine. Gold has industrial uses as a metal with specific properties. So, in fact, gold has been used as a medium of exchange for thousands of years throughout the history of human civilization, and gold as an element has existed on planet Earth for literally billions of years. But in her report, Bridget says that the dollar is going to be safer because it's backed by the American government, and I'm paraphrasing now, backed by the Federal Reserve, so people know it's going to be around a year from now. Well, this demonstrates just an astonishing lack of historical knowledge about money, about gold, about fiat currency. Every currency that has not been backed by something like gold has eventually collapsed throughout human history. When a nation can print unlimited volumes of a currency, unlimited amounts of dollars, for example, then those dollars eventually become far too numerous. Prices suffer inflation. The currency itself eventually suffers hyperinflation because governments print their way out of their debts rather than actually paying them off as promised. Now, the U.S. dollar used to be backed by gold because the dollar was tied to a certain amount of gold, and a dollar could actually be exchanged for gold. This was ended by, I believe, Richard Nixon. And so the U.S. government pulled the gold backing of its dollars and decided to go with what would eventually become a runaway fiat currency, which is what we're dealing with right now when the Federal Reserve, which is not, by the way, part of the U.S. government, so that's another key error in Bridget's reporting. The Federal Reserve is a private banking institution owned by the global banks. It has nothing to do with the federal government. no more than Federal Express or Federal Ammunition Company, for example. So the Federal Reserve is a private institution, but it creates money, and then it loans that money to the U.S. Treasury Department, which then owes that money to the Federal Reserve. So every dollar that the Fed creates and puts into circulation becomes a dollar of debt that is owed to the Fed by the U.S. taxpayers. Now think about that for a minute, because when the Fed creates $1 trillion to bail out Wall Street banksters, as it has done numerous times beginning in October 2008, every $1 trillion that the Fed creates is really $1 trillion in debt owed to the Fed by the U.S. taxpayers, even though the Fed did nothing to actually earn that money. All it did was create it. It printed it, essentially, just by creating accounting entries in a computer database. So this money, this fiat currency that Bridget explains as being reliable because it's going to be backed by the government, is actually the most unreliable thing in the world, in the sense that it's going to eventually collapse and become all but worthless. This is the only outcome to a fiat currency that is overproduced and ultimately leads to hyperinflation, like we saw in Weimar Germany following World War I, or as we saw in Argentina, or numerous other countries around the world throughout history. Ecuador, for example, their currency was hyperinflated in 1999, and they were running on the sucre. That became all but worthless in 1999. They switched over to the U.S. dollar and are now riding on the U.S. dollar, which is itself headed for hyperinflation as the Federal Reserve continues to create literally trillions of dollars of new currency. Now, currencies come and go. Nations rise and fall. And throughout world history, nations and civilizations have fallen with great regularity, and their currencies have gone down with them. But what has been around forever, even before human beings even walked on this planet, was gold. And gold will be here long after modern-day nations and civilizations and empires collapse into ruin. So for a reporter of a major network news organization in Canada to come on the air and say that gold isn't backed by anything, but dollars are backed by the government, and to imply that therefore dollars are far more reliable, really demonstrates a deep ignorance of economics, of human history, of the rise and fall of civilizations, and most importantly, as I mentioned before, this shows a disturbing dumbing down of the mainstream media, which is the #1 information source for mainstream people who are using that information to make decisions about their own economic futures. Well, if that information is bad information, or if it is information that lacks education, which clearly this report from CTV lacks education, then the people who are listening to that are going to be making decisions in their own lives without having the access to reliable and good information about the history of money and the history of gold and the history of civilizations and the real definition of what is reliable or what does backed by something mean. That this reporter could say gold is backed by nothing is essentially a nonsensical sentence by itself, because gold is intrinsically valuable. So what would it be backed by? Could you back gold with ivory or silver? Or what does she mean? You should back gold with paper? Green paper? It makes no sense, because gold itself is what has inherent value. And a money system that is based on gold, which means dollars, for example, that are backed by gold, and we don't have that in the USA anymore, but a money system that's backed by gold is a reliable money system that cannot be manipulated by the government nor the Federal Reserve for their own selfish benefit. You see, the creation of currency by the Fed is a hidden tax on the American people. In fact, it's a tax on anyone, anywhere, who is holding U.S. dollars or earning U.S. dollars, because every new dollar that is put into circulation by the Fed or by the Treasury dilutes the M2 money supply, thereby making dollars more plentiful and ultimately leading to a rise in prices on consumer goods. So this is a hidden tax, a hidden source of inflation that saps away the dollars that you are earning on your paycheck or the dollars you might have in a savings account. And when inflation rates are something like, let's say, 5% or 10% a year, it means you are losing 5 or 10% of all the money you've earned and saved without ever writing a check. In other words, the government, or the Federal Reserve in this case, can steal your money, can literally steal your purchasing power from you without even robbing your bank, without even requiring you to send them a check. They can steal your purchasing power by printing their own money and devaluing the currency, effectively shifting purchasing power from the holders of dollars to the creators of the new dollars, which is, of course, the Federal Reserve itself, which is working in conspiracy, you might say, with the U.S. Treasury to create debt that will become a burden on the American people. So this is why this news report from CTV is so important to understand, because it shows that a major television network will hire a reporter to go out and go on live television and report on a crucial topic for our times: gold, investments, the economy, and so on, the currency. And yet that reporter can be completely clueless and highly uneducated about the topic upon which she is speaking. This is very disturbing. And this is why we believe that airing this piece of news, which we are doing without profit, in fact, it is costing us money to air this because we pay for bandwidth and there is absolutely no for-profit, there is no financial gain for us from doing so. We are doing this purely as a public service to show the people of the world just what is lacking in modern-day conventional news programming. Because again, this has implications for society. This has implications on whether we trust the credibility and the knowledge of mainstream media reporters who are telling us things about topics that are important for our lives. We here at Natural News believe that this reporter's comments are important for the historical record of the lack of education that is now present in mainstream media reporters and the lack of understanding of these basic concepts of economics throughout the mainstream media. And that is why we have chosen to keep this clip on the air, even at our own expense, even though we are being threatened by Bell Media to remove it, which is making what we believe is an invalid copyright claim about this particular clip. We have chosen to keep this on the air because it is important for the public to understand what is happening today in the media and with gold and with our dollars. And this is one of the best ways that we can show people just how confused mainstream media reporters really are about issues like gold and money and currency. So with that said, and I apologize for the length of this commentary, but I think it's important for you to understand the context of why this clip is so important for public education and criticism and comment, and why it very clearly falls under fair use designation under copyright law. With that said, here is the clip from reporter Bridget Brown, who reported this live on CTV, a reporter who appeared to be talking with authority about gold and dollars, even though the words she was saying were complete nonsense.
Bridget joins us now. Bridget, overall, how did today compare to yesterday?
The biggest surprise of today was definitely gold. It was down about $100 an ounce. That represents the biggest two-day drop in 28 years. There's a couple of things going on today. Some investors were selling off their gold holdings to try to make up for losses in other areas. But Todd Hirsch says there's something else happening here too. Some investors aren't confident that with what gold is backed by, or if it's backed by anything at all, as compared to something like the U.S. dollar. Investors are comfortable that the U.S. dollar is backed by the American government. So no matter what is happening to the American economy, something like the U.S. dollar is backed by the Federal Reserve. That's going to be around a year from now. That's a much more comfortable investment for them. Tara.
Thank you, Bridget.